The old Royal Naval College and Queen's House dominate the scene in this photograph, taken from Greenwich Park between 1945 and 1965, while the perspective of the Thames North Bank is marked by many industry chimneys. Canary Wharf, along with the Isle of Dogs, Limehouse, and Poplar, was one of the busiest docks in the world. Following the 1960s, the port industry collapsed, and the docks were totally closed by 1980. Fremont Street, once the focal center of Las Vegas, is shown in this photo from 1953. Back then, the Golden Nugget, one of the city's oldest casinos, and its massive sign were a glittering icon of Sin City. The region, which also includes the Hotel Apache, El Cortez, and the Mint, earned the nickname Glitter Gulch due to the numerous tall neon signs that loomed over the tiny street. However, a development boom soon followed, kicking off the rise of the Las Vegas Strip, and Fremont Street now looks very different. The Government Offices Building, as it was then known, was erected to house the British colonial administration in Kuala Lumpur and opened in 1897. This shot was taken in the early 20th century. The opulent pile, located in the city center, was the grandest in Kuala Lumpur at the time, as the city was still in its early stages, having been created in 1857. The San Francisco cityscape, captured from Twin Peaks in 1947, is practically unrecognizable, if not for the Oakland Bay Bridge, which was completed only about 10 years earlier. While several high-rises had already appeared in the city's financial district, much of the city altered over the next few decades, as urban planning efforts in the 1950s and 1960s concentrated on neighborhood revitalization and the construction of new freeways. This famous boulevard, also known as the Bund, runs along the Huangpu River and is home to many of Shanghai's more European-style buildings, including what was once the Shanghai Bank, the large domed building, and the North China Daily News building, the building with two small domes next to the flagpole. The waterfront had several piers for tiny boats when this photograph was taken in 1927, and aside from the few spectacular buildings along the Bund, the remainder of the city's skyline is modest. The Berlin Cathedral, which was consecrated in the 15th century and is shown here about 1890, has gone through several modifications. A prominent Berlin landmark both then and now, it was severely damaged, and repair did not begin until 1975. Around the time this photograph was shot, Berlin had become the capital of the newly formed German Empire, resulting in considerable growth and expansion in the city. Dubai began as a fishing community in the early 18th century and has come a long way since then. Dubai's proximity to Iran made it an important commerce center even before the discovery of oil. Since the discovery of oil in the region in the 1960s, Dubai's expansion has been non-stop. Dubai Marina was photographed in 2003 when it was still in its early stages, an artificial canal metropolis spanning along the Persian Gulf shoreline that is now part of Dubai. Cairo is a very important metropolis with a history dating back to ancient Egypt. While much has changed in Cairo over the years, one of its most important structures, Sultan Hassan's Mosque Madrasa, has weathered the test of time. Built in the mid-14th century, it was photographed in 1930. Sydney, Australia's most populous city, has had a turbulent history marked by numerous conflicts, culminating in the 19th century when the situation stabilized and the city established itself as a significant cultural and financial center in Australia. Despite the fact that the Great Depression had a significant impact on the country, the renowned Sydney Harbour Bridge opened in May 1932. Following the city expanded and new industries emerged, resulting in extensive development. Few places in New York City have undergone such dramatic transformations as Times Square. It is shown here circa 1900, facing south toward Broadway on the left and 7th Avenue on the right. Growing out of a small hamlet noted for carriage making, the neighborhood became the hub of New York's horse carriage industry in the late 1800s. Longacre Square was named after Longacre in London, where William Henry Vanderbilt conducted the American Horse Exchange. As proposals for a subway station surfaced, the area was dubbed Times Square. Arc de Triomphe, officially known as Arc de Triomphe de l'Étoile, is one of the French capital's most iconic attractions. This aerial shot, taken in the early half of the 1900s, around 100 years after the landmark was completed, provides a nice insight of what the city used to look like, especially the tree-lined avenues that surround it. Barcelona, Spain. Antoni Gaudi's plan for Sagrada Familia stands out as his most famous and stunning accomplishment. Work on the monument began in 1882, initially under the supervision of Spanish architect Francisco de Paula del Villar, and it is shown here around 60 years later, circa 1940. The difference that 80 years of construction can make is simply astounding. Today, the Sagrada Familia appears to be a completely different building. The Golden Gate Bridge appears inextricably linked to San Francisco's skyline, but construction did not begin until 1933. This image depicts the view from Telegraph Hill across the Golden Gate Strait in 1868. Yerba Buena, a steep and thinly populated village on San Francisco Bay, existed only a few decades earlier. The United States annexed it from Mexico in 1846 and christened it after the bay. The Great Gold Rush of 1848, which brought fortune seekers and money to the port, helped to put it on the map. Miami Beach has changed dramatically from an empty sandbar and mangroves in the 1900s to a fashionable beach resort and prosperous metropolis by the 1910s. Several ambitious farmers and real estate developers worked together to construct a tiny resort village that was connected to the new city of Miami across Biscayne Bay by a wooden bridge in 1913, eventually replaced by the Venetian Causeway. Ocean Beach was incorporated in 1915 and changed its name to Miami Beach the following year. Throughout the 1920s, the expanding neighborhood of seashore hotels and casinos was the height of elegance. Honolulu became the capital of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1845, ruled by King Kamehameha III, who had conquered Oahu in 1804. He built the majestic Iolani Palace, which still stands today. American colonists, who controlled Hawaii's sugar-based economy, deposed the kingdom in 1893 and established the Republic of Hawaii, which the United States acquired as a territory in 1898. Honolulu's buildings were modest, and its streets were dirt tracks when photographed in the late 19th century, but it was no longer a small fishing village. It was a thriving center of the sandalwood and sugar trade, attracting an increasing number of merchants and missionaries. Chicago was incorporated as a town in 1833 and became a city in 1837, when its population reached 4,000. The first permanent settler was trapper and businessman Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, who established a trading post here in 1779. The Chicago Water Tower, built and shown here in 1869, was one of the few buildings to escape the city's devastating fire in 1871. Following the rebuild and a booming economy, Chicago pioneered the rise of the modern skyscraper. The 10-story home insurance company, built on the junction of Adams and LaSalle Streets in 1885, was the world's first. It was dismantled in 1931. The Ohio River, which runs through Cincinnati, has played an important role in the city's history. Steamboats were built here, and farmers brought their harvests and livestock to be transported downstream. By the early 1800s, Cincinnati had become a major meatpacking center, earning the nickname Porkopolis. By the end of the century, iron manufacturing had become its most important industry. Cincinnati, located on the border between the Free State of Ohio and the slave state of Kentucky, was regarded as a safe haven by many. The Roebling Suspension Bridge was photographed in 1867 when it first opened to traffic. Seattle, located on a short strip of land between Puget Sound and Lake Washington, has been shaped by water since it was first home to Coast Salish tribes in 1792, when the first European settlers arrived. Lumber and coal were the principal businesses in its early days, but fishing, shipbuilding, and shipping also played important roles in the town's prosperity. Incorporated in 1869, the population reached over 80,000 by 1900, a figure that tripled in the following decade. Several piers were constructed at the turn of the 19th century to accommodate the railroads and the Alaskan gold rush.